One. So guys, back with a brand new video. We're doing the second part of this because we couldn't finish it in the first part. We only were able to do the Eastern Conference, as you guys saw. But yeah, that one was pretty fun. So I'm sure this one will be pretty fun too. First off, with the Arizona Coyotes. As you guys want to say anything really quickly, it's
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun to get back on here, just talk about some hockey, talk about the trade deadline and things, and especially now, a weekish out from our last video, about 2 weeks out from the deadline, we have a lot to talk about. So it's pretty crazy. It's pretty cool to see how all these players are now aging in their new homes already, and it's a lot of fun to get back on here.
Yeah, I'd have to agree for sure. I mean, it's been a little separation between our last episode, but I'm looking forward to doing part two with you guys. So yeah, let's get into it.
oh yeah. So we'll go through first team quick because there's not really much to say about them, to be honest. First, we have the Coyotes. The chicken trade wasn't amazing. They got more out of the Brinket than they got. I mean, they traded less for the Brinket than they traded for Chikrin. I think they could have gotten a little bit less for Chikrin. That's my opinion. They got first and 2 seconds, but yeah, I think they could have gone maybe prospect more, something like that. Shane Goss is there. I feel like a third is not. I feel like more than a third for Shane Goss is there. Maybe a second, and like a low level prospect, something like that. The Voracek trade, that was just brutal. I don't really have much to say about that. Bukestad trade, I think that was not a bad idea for them. They got this decent bit of value out of someone they signed this past summer, which I think I had no idea what they were thinking there. I didn't think Bukestad was going to do much, but it looks like he's kind of having a bounce back season this year with Arizona. And the Edmonton get some depth there, which we won't say anything about Edmonton yet. And then I kind of also like that Nick Ritchie and Brett Ritchie were kind of swapped for each other. That's kind of cool. Well, yeah, that's all I gotta say. And yeah, I gave them a D.
Yeah, for me, I'm going with a C minus. For a rebuilding team, basically their goal at this deadline was uh, acquire as many picks and prospects as possible, get rid of a lot of players that are rumored to be on the way out of town, cough, cough, Jacob Chikrin, as well as for the Arizona Coyotes, which, I mean, it makes them look like a mess. It makes them look like the joke of the league. But at the end of the day, it is something that they wanted to do. They wanted to acquire a lot of cap space because they basically are in a mission to actually reach the cap floor because they're one of those teams that has such a bad team that none of their players have big cap hits. So they basically went out of their way to acquire $8 million worth of Jacob Voracek just for the fact that they need to reach the cap floor. Makes them look like a joke, but at the end of the day, when you look at this team, they filled every single goal they had going into this deadline. So that's why I think a C minus is where I'm going to put them. In regards to the Chikrin trade in particular, you definitely could argue that they could have got more, but I mean, there's a reason that 2 weeks in to him being held onto the bench, they couldn't find a fit. It's because no one was really giving them the value that they obviously wanted for Chikrin. So they kind of, at the end of the day, had to fall to that. They couldn't have this guy go another trade deadline without getting traded. So I kind of agree with the GM of Arizona that they did all they could. They basically had to make the choice: is it worth at least getting something, even if it's not exactly what they want? And they ended up deciding, yeah, it's worth getting something for Chikrin. And they didn't get a bad return whatsoever. I mean, they got a first in 2 seconds, and looking at the conditions, that could end up turning into a lot more. So at the end of the day, it wasn't a great deadline for them, but I think somewhere in the C's is a pretty fair place to put them, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'll agree. But I'm gonna go a little bit lower. With Jared in the middle between you guys. I'm gonna go with the D plus for Arizona. Um, but yeah, no, they had a few questionable trade. Chikrin, I mean, that they handled that situation so poorly. And to only get a first and 2 seconds out of it, I feel like it's quite disappointing. The Leafs basically traded had the same amount of value for Ryan O'Reilly, so and the charge. So yeah, just questionable decision there. And then they obviously got rid of the guy that gained a lot of uh uh, I'm not sure what the word is, but Nick Bukestad is a guy that they also was rumored to trade. They traded basically everybody that everybody thought they were gonna. The Gosses Bear trade, they could have definitely got more for a guy that's been very successful in Arizona. So I'm gonna go with the D plus. But they did get worse generally, and they're gonna get they're now in this Connor Bedard range, and if they get him, that would be monumental for their franchise. That would literally save the Arizona Coyotes. So we'll see what happens. and at the draft lottery. But for now, I didn't love the trade. I didn't love the value that the Coyotes got for players that they wanted to send away. So D plus for me.
Yeah, I feel like both of those are pretty fair ratings. Well, there's two games where teams scored 7 goals. Bruins won 7-0. Golden Knights won 7-2 to the Jackets. All right. So going next, we have the Colorado Avalanche. I gave them a C rating. Uh, I need to refresh my memory a little bit there because I don't fully remember what it was, but probably did for good
They got
animation.
Lars Eller for a second. They got back Jack Johnson, who was a big part of, not a big part, but he was a defenseman on their cup
Yeah,
run winning team. Other than that, they didn't do anything crazy. They got a prospect, but really the main two trades are the Lars Eller deal, the Jack Johnson deal, and then they traded a prospect that was picked in the second round of 2017 that was never really going to work out in Colorado, and then got like a third goalie depth option.
yeah, Keith Kincaid. Yeah, there wasn't much to their deadline. I gave them a C mainly because of the Larzello deal. The Avs center core is just horrible in my opinion. Not horrible, but like it's just not as good as it was past years. But helping Larzella, getting Larzella, they slotted him onto the third line, which clearly is working decently well for them past little bit. But yeah, but got Larzella, which is pretty decent, mid six forward that they definitely have used their advantage so far. Yeah, second round pick for him. Could have arguably put him on the second line instead of JT Comp for being center on the second line, but feel like that was still a pretty smart trade for them. And yeah, also like you said, Jack Johnson. I like that because I know he was like they were like the players on the Avs were like big fans of Jack Johnson. They're happy for him to be back. Yeah, that's why I gave him a C. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, for me, I'm gonna go with a C plus. And if we want to push our deadline grade back to the time of the Dennis Mulligan trade, that would probably make me bump it up to about a B minus. Because in general, I mean, you compare it to the moves they made last year before their cup run, acquiring Lehkonen and a bunch of other guys. They definitely did a lot more last year than this year. But that also has to do with the fact that right now on the Avalanche, their biggest issue isn't anything to do with their roster. It's just the fact that everyone on their team has pretty much been injured at some point this season. So I guess what they're kind of holding out their hopes is, and the reason that they didn't go totally all in at this deadline is because they know a lot of guys are going to be coming back from injury, and that's going to help them out on their quest to win another Stanley Cup. So I don't hate the fact that they only made a couple minor deals just to bolster up their depth a little bit. I mean, trading a second round pick for Lars Eller, a guy who in 2018 scored the cup winning goal on the Washington Capitals, a team that's a little bit similarly built to the Colorado Avalanche. He was a guy that was playing on Washington's third line as well, scored the cup winning goals. And the fact that they're getting guys that have won Stanley Cups before that could slot their way into depth positions. Don't get me wrong, nothing they did is monumental or big and is worthy of like a B or B plus, but I think a C plus is fair. They didn't have a bad deadline. It wasn't great either though.
And I'm gonna go with a B minus, because I just think they got some really good value for some guys who are gonna help them. I'm not sure about Andreas Englund and how good this guy is, but they picked up Jack Johnson, who's a roster defenseman if in case of injuries in the playoffs, because you know those things happen. And then I really like their Lars Eller trade, getting a second round pick for a guy that they very
Trading
much
a second round pick rather. They traded the pick they got Barzella.
yeah, excuse me, sorry. So yeah, so Eller, which is a huge pickup for them, especially with all these injuries. And that roster is going to be stacked come playoff time. Personally, I have them winning the Stanley Cup over Boston. And we'll get into our we can get into our predictions in about a month. But yeah, so I'm really I think the Avalanche team just got better at the deadline. But to be honest, like they obviously need to get better to be to be more competitive in the playoffs, but also they don't have anything. Like they traded all their picks, prospects. They don't have anything left. So they did what they could to boost their team and making a couple of trades, like getting Jack Johnson, Lars Eller, picking up a goaltender in Keith Kincaid, were some nice additions. But yeah, nothing special going on in Colorado. Because yeah, I know like what are they gonna do with whatever many picks they have, which is close to this number.
Yeah,
Sick.
yeah. Colorado, there's so many injuries. They have 7 injuries right now. 2 day-to-day, 1 out, and two day-to-days, two outs, and 3 on IR. Yeah, Landeskog is on IR is pretty bad for them, but they're getting Lehkonen back soon, which would definitely be a big help for them. Uh, yeah, that was a pretty good deadline for them. All right, moving on to the Chicago Blackhawks. I gave them a B minus. I think they did. I don't think they got as nearly as much value as they could have gotten with Patrick Kane. I don't know. That's just my opinion. But yeah, they got a second and a fourth for their the face of their franchise for the past 10 plus years, something like that. I like the McCabe Lafferty trade for them. Obviously, I liked it for the Leafs more, but yeah, I liked it for them. I feel like they got decent value for it. They got Joey Anderson, which not amazing, but he's a decent roster player. The Leafs traded Andres Janssen for him a few years back. Pavel Gogolev, which is mid-tier prospect, but the Leafs weren't really doing anything with him, so figured might as well trade him. Got a first in 2025 and a second in 2026. So yeah, that was a really good trade. Didn't do much else. They took on Nikita Zaitsev's contract with a second and fourth, which I think was a smart idea for them. But yeah, they didn't do much else besides those major trades. Max Domi, I like that trade. They got Anton Khudobin, which is like he can't really do much at this point anymore, and they also got a second round pick. And yeah, that's all we got to say about them for B not for Chicago B minus.
Well, you said that you liked the Nikita Zaitsev trade for Chicago. I think that's actually the reason that I'm bumping them down from a B plus to a B or B minus, which is what I'm giving them because I think that was an awful trade for Chicago. And it goes to show you that Lou Lamoriello signing that Nikita Zaitsev deal, $4.5 million after one good season with Toronto, and basically now two teams have had to overpay to get that contract off their books. Ottawa needed to attach a second round pick to that just to get Chicago to accept it. And I get it in a team in Chicago's position, especially now after this deadline that they freed up so much other cap. It's not going to be hard for them to spend $4.5 million. But this is not a good defenseman that they're paying almost $5 million for. So I think that's an awful deal for Chicago. But otherwise, aside from the Nikita Zaitsev deal, I will agree with you. I think as much as they didn't get a ton for Patrick Kane, a guy that's been with their team for so long, that still has shown he has a lot of skill even to this day. I would have liked them to get a little bit more in that deal, but still at the end of the day, they got two prospects from it as well as a second round pick that could turn into a first round pick. So at least they're kind of wagering their future a little bit and are acknowledging that that pick, by getting rid of Patrick Kane, they could end up getting a first round pick out of it. So I don't hate that at all. Getting in Anders Bjork, a guy that just hasn't worked out in Buffalo, might as well get this guy that's going to slot in. I'm not sure where he's playing exactly right now, but a guy that has decent enough potential that he could slot into a position in the next phase of the Chicago Blackhawks future. As you mentioned in regards to the trade like made with the Leafs, Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty, they got two prospects that were never going to work out in Toronto. Fine, you get them on Chicago, a rebuilding team, and maybe these guys are going to get a chance. I know already Joey Anderson has kind of slotted himself into a bottom six position. So it's a lot of moves I don't really hate. I mean, I'm giving them a B, but it's that Zaitsev trade that really is preventing me from giving them anything higher.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Blackhawks, I think I did really like their trade deadline. Picking up a lot of draft capital to go in a direction which they clearly need to go in. Um, and we'll keep bringing up the guy's name, Connor Bedard. A lot of these teams are going all in for this guy, but to be honest, this is a very stacked draft class, so a very, very good consolation prize for Adam Fantilli, and Matvey Michkov is also a solid player in the KHL. So Chicago is definitely preparing for this uh draft and for their rebuild. This is a big trade deadline for them, obviously for the next decade, for or half decade, whatever, how long this takes. The Blackhawks, they fully set themselves in the direction. I think a lot of people thought Taves is going to be dealt, but looks like he's played this is his last season as a Blackhawk, with his whole injury thing, anyway, so yeah, the Hawks. Um, I do like the moves they made. Um, to kind of talk about what Jared said with the Zaitsev deal, they bring in a guy that really has not. He's had many opportunities in Ottawa and Toronto and has never turned out the way that the teams wanted him to. But this is a guy. He's gonna be on their books for 2 more years. You might as well just keep him around, give him a chance. So yeah, no, it's obviously he's not a great player, but that the Blackhawks defensive core is just so terrible. With that Kane trade, and I mean with that after that McCabe trade, so might as well pick up somebody, get some draft capital for him. Um, but overall, I really like the moves they made. With especially with Kane, the amount of value they got for him. I know a lot of people were talking about not much value towards the end, but he really turned it up. Chicago, I'm gonna give them an A minus. I think they made some good moves. Really like their deals. Picked up some first round picks. Picked up some second round picks. And this team is horrible, and that's good for that franchise. So yeah, A
Right.
minus.
So going on to the next team, we have the Dallas Stars, the other side of the Domi trade. I think they really did help their offensive depth a lot with bringing in two guys who can help them a lot. Who can help them a lot, just like what their problem has been, kind of for the past bit. Yes, they do have Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, Joe Pavelski, Jimmy Benz is having a bounce back year. Yes, they do have those guys, but they did help their defense, their forward depth a lot with their mid six. Yeah, I don't think they really needed to do anything to their goalies or defense. Anyways, defense looks really good right now. Goalies with Otter and net, and then Matt Murray backing him up for now until Wedgwood is back. But yeah, I think Wedgwood is kind of the perfect backup for a team like Dallas. I don't know, that's my opinion. Sagan's out right now, but he'll be back soon. Glendening's out, and Marsh May's out. So yeah, their forward core is way better than it is right now. But just that they're just suffering what happens with the energy injuries. Yeah. So
Yeah, no,
I give them B plus. That's what I gotta say.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the most important thing is just the fact that their offensive core is significantly deeper today than it was before the deadline happened. And that's with them acquiring guys like Max Domi. The only reason I'm going to give them a B plus, the only reason I initially had them at an A minus, but I really did not like the Dadonov trade for them. I don't think they made the right move deciding on Dadonov over Denis Gurianov. I think Denis Gurianov showed enough promise throughout their Stanley Cup run, especially in 2020, but as well just throughout his years in Dallas. I think he showed enough promise and skill that flipping him out for, I mean, a guy like Evgeny Dadonov that's just kind of meh. He has shown flashes of greatness, apparent like in little bits, but I didn't think that was a good move for them at all. So that's the only thing that's causing me to dock them down. But in general, yeah, they recognize what their area of need was. As you said, their goaltending solidified. The defensive core, especially with the resurgence of Miro Heiskanen, is solidified. It's just offensive depth that they needed, and that's what they got with getting Domi. And yeah, Dadonov, even though I do think they were better off keeping Gurianov, but regardless, it was a good, not great deadline, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go with a B minus here. I think that I know a lot of confused heads there, but yeah, I just really did not like that deal with the
The
Dadonov
Gurianov
trade.
one?
Yeah, the Gurianov deal. Um, they lost a lot. This is the guy that's young and he's had some good games with Montreal. And Dodonov obviously not having a career year by any means, but um, I guess uh, get put losing a guy that's young still has potential. For somebody who's is he expiring? Does anybody know if
I'm
Dodonov's?
not sure what
Dodona?
Dadonov's situation is yet.
Yeah.
Let me check real quick. I think he is, but I could be wrong. Dodonov.
Anyways,
No
doesn't.
matter what, he's just like the most important factor is just he's older. He
Yeah, he's
Gurianov
expiring.
had the
He's expiring.
potential, and
Yeah.
Dadonov,
So
yeah, I mean he's expiring, but even the fact that he's just an older player that very rarely in his career, aside from I mean after one trade last deadline, he went on like a week long hot streak and then cooled down. But like at the end of the day, he's a very meh player. Like there's not a lot of upside there whatsoever.
yeah. So Dodonov. a guy that you're gonna potentially have for half a season. With a guy like Gurianov who still has a lot of upside, especially if he has a good fit in Montreal. I don't love that trade. I don't know if he just wasn't gonna get the time in Dallas, but that's just something I don't know because I don't watch the Stars in the regular. But
Thing is,
uh,
he was part of their cup win, no, not cup winning. He was part of their like Stanley Cup finalist team, and like he wasn't playing just fourth line minutes, never getting a chance to move up. Like he even in 2020, and he's been moving up since then. But I believe he was like a second or third liner as like a young kid. So I just don't think you. I could be completely wrong, but at least from what I know about the situation, I don't think it has anything to do with him not getting up an opportunity. I think it was just like an issue of one guy went cold this year and they were just like not willing to be patient with him and we're just like, okay, you're not doing well now. We want to win it. Like now is our best chance at winning a cup. So like just flip him out of town. But I think it was a mistake. I think that's one that absolutely stars management is going to look back on and say, what the hell were we doing? Because they basically looked at Guryanov's little stretch of bad play and just totally flipped him out for a guy that has a lot less potential for the now and for the future.
yeah, completely agree. That's a kind of a trade that you're gonna shake your. I feel like a lot of people are gonna shake their heads on later a couple of years if we see Gurianov succeeding in Montreal. But the other trade I did really like for Dallas to only give up a second and then a guy that's getting a guy you just get a bad contract off your books for a guy that's gonna very much help your team. He had a huge impact on Carolina last year. So yeah, Domi definitely a lot of it's a great fit in Dallas. Definitely got better. Who knows how far they go this year? They have a really good team, and the Western Conference isn't as good as the East. So we'll see if Dallas can get past a Colorado or an Edmonton, or Vegas. So it's gonna be an interesting postseason for the Stars because really like after that Cup Finals, like they haven't really done accomplished anything. So they really need to figure things out. So. Maybe they got a few more years in them. Ben has had a fantastic year, but they've got some horrible contracts on their books, so they've got to figure something out sooner or later. I like this trade for them. We'll see how they do at the deadline. So B minus for me because I really did not like that Gurianov deal. But it's close to a B. B minus B is I guess by choice.
Yeah, something around the B minus to B plus. All right, moving on to the next team, we have the Minnesota Wild. They made a few decent trades, did a few retentions. But there's no reason to talk about that. Jordan Greenway, I think it was not a bad trade. Got a second and a fifth for it. I think it's some good value for a player that just really wasn't happy with his time in Minnesota and they just wanted to get rid of him. So they got rid of him for a second and a fifth. Klingberg trade was the very last minute. I'm surprised they didn't give up like a third or second in the trade. But yeah, they got him at half retained for two prospects and a fourth, which I think it was a really good trade. Obviously, Klingberg's taking a big step down, but still think it's a pretty good trade. They made a few other trades, but nothing much else to big to talk about. But yeah, I give him a C. I feel like that's kind of fair. Maybe could have bumped it to a C plus or B minus, but I feel like C is pretty good for the Wild.
Yeah, I'm actually going to disagree with you. I actually really liked this deadline for the Wild, and I would have agreed. I'll say this: I would have agreed with you if it wasn't for the Klingberg trade made at the absolute last minute. But I mean, even before that, I mean, they had a goal. They bolstered up their offensive depth. So they got Gustav Nyquist, who's older but still getting him retained at 50%. They're only paying him 2.7 million, so not a big cap hit at all for a guy that can easily slot into like a middle six position. They got Marcus Johansson, that's been pretty good on some teams that have gone deep in the past. They got a young forward in Oscar Sundquist. And then last but not least, I'm with you that if it was only those moves they made, and obviously the trade where they got rid of Greenway and got a second round pick, I probably would have put them somewhere around a C plus D minus. But then they went ahead and got John Klingberg at 50% retained, and like Klingberg hasn't had a great year on Anaheim, who's been probably the worst team in the league all season long. But the fact that they got him 50% retained and are only paying $3.5 million, even if it's just for 1 year and one playoff run, the fact that they only had to give up a fourth round pick and two prospects that chances are no one's really heard of, I mean, there's not a lot not to like about that deal. And I actually do think it was a pretty good deadline for the Wild. I'm going to give them B and B plus, or a B plus, because I think it's pretty good.
And I'm actually gonna go with an A minus. I really, really like their trade deadline. We can kind of ignore the picks they got for getting for just retaining some salary. But anyways, from I really like their deals. So with Marcus Johansson, they gain some depth for a small price of a third round pick, and then get Gustav Nyquist retained for a fifth, and then a few days later they get rid of a guy that really hasn't found his way in Minnesota, Jordan Greenway for a second and a fifth. So just like that, you get both your picks back, um, and with those players. So with Nyquist and Johansson, and then they traded a fourth for Sundqvist, another depth player, and then at the end, it really that would really shock to me is a fourth. Of not I'm not sure about Nestorenko if he's a strong prospect or not, but then Andre Schuster, so that's like nothing for a guy he's been very good this year in Anaheim. Um, we all knew he was gonna get traded, but I don't think anybody was expecting this. Like there were guys much worse than him that got traded for less, and you could bring up the point that he's expiring, so he might not return with Minnesota. But then again, there are a lot of guys that are on expiring deals that are UFAs that people traded first round picks, second round picks for. So I'm really shocked, and this deal just really sent it out of the reef. I already enjoyed their trades before. I would have put them at a B plus B, because of those, but this year I was I don't think I was expecting anybody was expecting them to be better than Colorado, and now they still have a chance to catch up to Dallas and even take the Central Division. So this Wild team is very strong defensively. I think even some people were, and actually not some people, most people were expecting them to go into a different direction, maybe trading Matt Dumba because um, the depth they had in defensemen, but instead they still have a lot of prospects, a lot of picks, and some really good roster players too. Cap space is an issue that they do have. However, I really think that if they can figure out the cap space situation, this Wild team, even after a couple years where they haven't quite figured things out, I think they'll be able to be successful. And they're gonna have face a tough matchup in round one against Colorado this year, if that ends up being the matchup. But still, this team is very strong, and I'll have Colorado in that series, but I would not be entirely shocked if the Wild, with the roster that they have, would be able to beat them. They have better goaltending than Colorado, with Gustafsson, who's been fantastic. But yeah, no, this Wild team is very strong trade deadline. A minus to an A even. I think you guys undervalued their deadline. They did really well.
No,
Yeah.
I agree with that. The only thing, I mean, another thing I want to add on the Wild just before we move over to the Blues is what were they doing with taking on so much cap from other teams? Like
That was strange.
aside from just like I guess building good relationships with other GMs and just like doing other teams favors, I don't get what were they thinking. Like when they're a team that is, as you said, in the quest to potentially even take over as the top team in the Central, they needed every last dollar they could get to kind of get as much depth as possible.
Very
And
confusing.
they wasted $1.8 million on Ryan O'Reilly, like retaining a bunch of cap from him, as well as they are retaining, I believe it's $2.25 million in the Dmitry Orlov deal. So I don't know what they were thinking there. That's just,
Yeah.
again, very strange.
They lost
Aside,
$6 million for a fourth and a fifth.
ridiculous.
So
Like
strange.
again, the only thing I could think of is that they're just trying to they want to basically build up enough good faith that another GM down the line is going to help them. But like, why in this deadline when it's basically you could make an argument for the Wild, especially with the fact that they have a few big contracts that are going to come off the books at the end of this year. You could argue that this is one of their last chances of really going on a run and kind of catching this lightning in a bottle before they go back to the mediocrity they were trapped in for years. So you'd think they'd want to spend every last dollar on bolstering up their team for this year. But hey, you know what? They were able to do all that other stuff while still bolstering up their team. So I guess I can't really hate on it. It's just very strange.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
really
it
good.
was an interesting trade deadline for them. Yeah, taking on that much cap space just to, yeah, like you were saying, taking on cap space just to like have a good relationship with people. Just want to point out a few things, like 2 or 3 things before we move on. Got It's kind of weird for Marcus Johansson being on the Wild for the second time. He was on the Caps for the second time before he got traded from the Caps to the Wild. A little bit of a weird career for him. Yeah, Suster. Believe he was on the Ducks last year, but I guess he found his way to the Wild AHL team and he got traded. And then, yeah, in my opinion, I think the Wild defense decor is top five. Like having lefty Jacob Middleton, Jonas Brodin, Golgoski, right D being Jared Spurgeon, Matt Dumba, and John Klingberg. Excuse me. Yeah, in my opinion, I think that's kind of crazy. Brodin is on LTIR right now, so yeah, Brodin is on LTIR right now, so it's not the best for them in that sense. But I think that they just help. Like their D is one, yeah, their D is really good, and yeah, Gustafson's having a pretty good year as well. All right, so moving on to the next team, we have the St. Louis Blues. I give them an A for what they did this trade deadline. I feel like they are good value for all the trade for both big trades they did with Ryan getting rid of Ryan O'Reilly for Gaudette, which wasn't really gonna have a chance in Toronto, so maybe helps him out a little bit. And Mikhail Abramov, another mid-tier forward prospect, and they also got a first, third, and second. That's pretty good value. Like the Leafs got Ryan O'Reilly, yes, insane, but also Noel Achari. I really liked for them. Sadly, he got injured, but I don't. I think he's day to day right now. I believe because it wasn't that big of an injury,
Yeah.
avoided a concussion, which is really good. But yeah, Noel Achari is really good for the Leafs depth right now. Ryan O'Reilly, obviously, amazing for the Leafs. Probably going to be third line center for the Leafs playoffs. Yeah, pretty good deadline for everything that happened. They got good value of they got good value with Tarasenko as well. The Barbashev trade's a little bit interesting. I thought they were looking for like a second or something like that, but they got a prospect who was picked in the first round a few years ago, but just didn't really work out for Vegas. Verona trade, give Verona a new chance on a different team. Yeah, that's all I gotta say. With an
Yeah,
A.
I'm giving them a B. I mean, I don't think you could ever say they had a fantastic deadline when they had to part ways with Vladimir Tarasenko, their best winger, and their best centerman in Ryan O'Reilly. So I definitely don't know if any Blues fans are looking at this trade deadline as a win necessarily, especially considering where the expectations were for the Blues going into the year. Like, obviously, based on how the year went, they ended up having to decide that they wanted to part ways with all these guys and go in a more rebuilding direction. But going into the year, that was not the expectation. This Blues team looked good by a lot of accounts. They made it to the second round last year, and a lot of people thought that they could build on that going into this year. And it's just very hard for me to look at this year as a whole and this deadline especially as a win, considering based on their expectations who they ended up having to part ways with. But given the situation they were put in with the fact that they've been awful this year, the fact that they at the very least got rid of Tarasenko, who there's been rumors that he was going to be out of town for like 2 years now, and they got at the very least one first round pick for him, potentially multiple if those conditions pan out. Same situation over in Toronto, where they at least got one first round pick and a second round pick. So they're getting a lot of prospects and value back. As well as the fact that in the Barbashev trade, another guy who was like a middle six winger, they at least got the Golden Knights top prospect for him. So I don't hate these deals on their own. They're fine deals, and based on the situation the Blues have been forced into, I'll give them their credit that they're all right and they make a lot of sense. But it's hard for me to argue more than a B just based on the fact that really this is a team that looked like they were going to be decent going into the year. They absolutely shit the bed this year, and as a result, they've had to lose their two top players.
Yeah, and I'll have to agree with a B there. I really did like the direct. I really did like the moves they made. It was a little bit questionable when they traded for Jacob Verana. Then again, it was a really good deal. They got rid of. It was for seventh and a prospect I've never heard of. For a guy who's really succeeded in Detroit. However, that was strange when you consider they made a trade with Vegas and then Toronto and New York, those deals, but they got a whole lot of draft capital and prospects. So it's extremely confusing when later we found out that when like in the morning of Friday on Friday on that Jesus can't talk on that Friday morning when I saw that trade I was very confused because of the last few trades they made, so a little bit confusing, but anyway, still Vancouver Vancouver, sorry, St. Louis, guys, it's fun day. Give me something here. But anyways, no, St. Louis. I really did like the trades they made, but it was a little bit confusing. Um, and they haven't really. It was really it was strange the year they've had. Obviously they've dealt with some injuries, but um, it's been. It was. I don't think anybody was expecting them to be third round pick, even though every team has a tough road. Every team's gonna have players who are injured, but the Blues, they really like have not been able to. They've had a bad year. They have a losing record, so the Blues are. I went with B with them for them. Sorry.
The only thing about the Blues is, I mean, if they were to have, like, obviously they had an awful year, there's no question about it. But a lot of times when a team just has a flat out awful year, you'd think that the GM would at least recognize how many years in a row they've been good. I mean, it's not long ago that the Blues were a Stanley Cup champion team, and they haven't changed a lot since then. So I personally, if it were up to me, I would have said, you know what, let's just chalk it up for what it is. It's an awful year. Keep the big names around. Maybe not Tarasenko because he obviously wanted out and you don't want to lose him for nothing. But I would have said that this team has a core there that actually looks pretty strong. And even as a young core with Kyrou and Robert Thomas rather, where I'm like, I don't know, you should have ran this back, kept this team for next year, and they probably would have been back near the top of the Central Division. So I think it was I don't think a desperation move was needed where they almost like blew it up at this deadline, and that just was not needed based on one bad season, in my opinion. And now next year, with the amount of names they've parted ways with, they've now like forced themselves into a rebuild, which I just didn't think was necessary based on how good their team was. Like as you said, there were a lot of injuries, and it could have been chalked up to, with those injuries, their team just kind of sucked this year. Maybe they would have been better next year. And I do think it's going to be one of those things where I get going all in for a rebuild in one year, especially based on Connor Bedard's year. But they're going to be awful for years to come now because of the moves they made at this deadline. It's just hard for me to praise their deadline that much based on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to the next team. Don't really have any last thoughts. So moving on to the next team, we have the Nashville Predators. I feel like it did kind of suck for them to have to move on from Mattias Ekholm, but it was gonna happen. Ekholm didn't really want to be in Nashville with them having they have quite a lot of good defense. They have Dante Fabro, which is pretty good. Just pulling up the trades they did. Yeah, Asplund for seventh wasn't much. Mikael Granlund for second. I liked. They got rid of. You got rid of kind of like a middle six forward center that they didn't really need. Who's overpaid for a second. I think it was pretty good. And yeah, going back to the Ekholm trade really quickly. Tyson Berry, Reed Schaefer, which I think what they got in 2022 draft, and a first and a fourth for Ekholm. 4% retained to the sixth. Don't know why 4% retained. Kind of weird. And then yeah, the Tanner Janelle trade. Let's talk about that for a second. We talked about Tampa's side of it, but that was definitely an interesting trade, giving up 5 picks and Cal Foot, a pretty decent defenseman. Not decent, but like he's young and still a little bit of potential. But yeah, not a bad defenseman for Tanner Janelle. Yes, Tanner Janelle. He's young. He's pretty good. But to trade that much for to bolster up your third line like you did when you won the cup twice. Like I just don't see the point of Tampa. I think Tampa's mindset is get the third line good and new in the cup because that's what they do every year. They trade for forwards that help their third line. That's all they
Nick
do,
Paul. Fuck
and
you.
then they go to the Stanley Cup final. But yes, they did lose last year. So all they've been doing is bolstering up their third line and trying to get as good as possible in the third line. Like, yeah, there's not much else to say about the Preds in my opinion. I give them an A. I feel like that's pretty good. Yeah, it's sad and it kind of sucks for them that they had to move on from Ekholm, but yeah, it just wasn't going to be good for Ekholm there, and they got some good value out of Ekholm.
Yeah, I'm also going to give them an A or an A minus, something along those lines. I definitely wouldn't say it was the perfect deadline, but in the case of the Matthias Ekholm trade, I liked it for Edmonton. We'll get into Edmonton in a little bit. I liked it in the sense that Edmonton got a guy that really helps their issue of not being good defensively. Like Matthias Ekholm is a really good defensive defenseman. But on the other end, in the situation that the Nashville Predators are in, for the long term at least, it's very hard to argue against the Nashville Predators being the overall winner of that trade, considering they got an offensive defenseman in Tyson Barrie, a former 2022 first round pick in Reed Schaefer, as well as a 2023 first round pick. So it's very hard to argue against them, a young up and coming team that's so close, it seems like, from kind of moving on, just based on the fact that they have great goaltending and a great defenseman. So, like, they're very close. They just need a few little pieces to really put them over the edge. And this trade gives them that. And what they're doing is parting ways with Matthias Ekholm, a very old guy that was going to end up leaving anyways, who makes $6 million. So it gives them $6 million more to spend moving on. Or obviously, I get that Tyson Barrie's $4.5 million kind of negates that. But regardless, it gives them some more cap space to work with. And it just gives them younger, faster, quicker guys that are going to help this young and up team find a way to move on and improve. So I really liked it in that sense. I liked the fact that, I mean, the Rasmus Asplund trade was just, it gives them another depth guy for nothing. He gives them a depth guy for a 2025 seventh round pick. It just gives them a younger, whatever guy that they could slot anywhere. And in terms of the Mikael Granlund trade, they basically banked on the fact that the Penguins are looking for any excuse to keep themselves in a playoff spot. So they were willing to give up a second round pick, which could end up being decently good with this year being so deep. For only Mikael Granlund, who was not really doing anything in Nashville. So in general, it was a good deadline for them. I'm giving them an A or an A minus.
Now I'm gonna go with an A as well. I really like the trades that they made to get an entire draft class from Tampa Bay, as well as a second for Nino Niederreiter, picking up a few guys for future considerations, and then obviously that Echo trade was great. Same with Granlund deal, and then picking up Aspen for a 70th round pick. So, Nashville really like the moves they made. It's gonna be interesting to see what they do these next few years. With now we know the news that Barry Trotz is going to take over in management for Nashville starting next year. So they have a lot of good prospects, including Yaroslav Askarov, who's uh, like already is a fantastic goaltending prospect when they have UC Saros as well. So Nashville really is set up. So interested to see what they do. But they still have some good pieces. We could even see them at the off season just saying goodbye to the playoff chances, to the run they've had these last few years, like in the Cup Finals, having a few good runs. But yeah, I think they really did set themselves up with a former first round pick, an extra first round pick from in that Edmonton trade, and then obviously a bunch of picks from Tampa for Janot. But I want to touch quickly. I know we don't have. I know we don't want to. Talk a lot, but I just want to touch up quickly on Tampa side of things. Tampa Bay is a team that I honestly, after we went back, and I still think it's a bad trade. And right now, Janot has been horrible, but in the off season, this guy, like their third line is where they make the most impact. Hot take, their first line scores, right? That's a stacked first line with Point, Stamkos, and Kucherov. But that third line, they do it both. They do both. They do many things. They check. They play defense. They score. And Tampa, after getting worse in the offseason with losing Palat, pick up a huge piece in Jano to help them solidify that third line, and we'll see how it turns out, how Jano turns out against Toronto in the playoffs. But for now, obviously that was a horrible deal, and sacrificing a lot of their future for a guy that's not not that very good. So we'll see what happens, but I kind of have a little bit more insight about that now. But back to Nashville, they made some really nice moves. Um, and yeah, I think Jared has something to say. I can tell.
Yeah. Back to that Tanner Jeannot trade. I mean, no one is saying that Tanner Jeannot is not going to be impactful for Tampa. He's a great defensive-minded, gritty player that is going to make any
Yeah,
team that plays Tampa, especially our Toronto Maple Leafs, it's going to make our lives miserable. I mean, Tampa is going to be a nightmare to play, and a large part of that is because they got a guy like Tanner Jeannot who just absolutely hits everything in his path. But when you're grading the trade, you can't just look into. I mean, listen, you could look into the impact that Tampa's getting, but when you look at how much they gave up for it, it simply doesn't compute.
yeah,
They took a guy that's going to just make them a harder team to play and a guy that's going to make them more physical today. But they gave up a former first round pick, a first round pick, a second round pick, a third round pick, a fourth round pick, a fifth round pick. You still have to give the win in that trade to Nashville, even while admitting that this addition is going to make Tampa a harder team to play against. So I think two things could be true at the same time. Yeah, Tampa, they're going to get this guy in, and it's going to make them very difficult to play, and it could even help bring them another Stanley Cup. Like this is a really good addition
yeah.
for them. But
And
they still gave
sorry,
up a lot for it. And he doesn't have any offensive upside that, in my opinion, warrants them giving up that much. I mean, it's the same thing you look at the moves they made last year. I was very critical about them getting Brandon Hagel and giving up two prospects and two first round picks. Doesn't mean he's not a great player for them. Doesn't mean he wasn't a great player for them. He actually was a very big part in the Lightning ultimately taking down the Leafs, was got depth guys such as Brandon Hagel. But you could still say they gave up too much for it. And I think in this case, Nashville absolutely rewarded and
yeah,
benefited
for sure.
themselves based on the needs of the Tampa Bay Lightning trying to get more physical. They're like, okay, I'll let you guys get more physical because all we need right now is your picks and prospects, and Tampa just handed all of that over.
And we can't fully judge this trade, I feel like, until we see the end of this playoffs. I mean, that's when the real grade for the Lightning is gonna work out. If this Tanner Jeannot is gritty against Toronto, gets them the win in Game 7 or whatever many games, takes them in the Cup final and they win it, and he plays. Obviously, he's not going to be a huge role. He's not, top 6 player, but if he plays a crucial role, we having us having a C minus, a C, for Tampa Bay could skyrocket to a B plus. So we'll see what happens. But shout out to Tampa Bay for letting the Devils score 3 goals consecutively in 6 minutes, and good stuff. New Jersey, shout out to them. And let's
Yeah,
move on to Winnipeg.
especially for my fantasy team. Yes, for Brett. Going on to the next team, we have the Winnipeg Jets. Yeah, we have the Winnipeg Jets. I give them A minus. I feel like that's pretty decent. They did two major moves, let's say, with picking up Vladislav Nemestikov, which definitely helped their defense. I'm not defense. Helped their I'd say bottom six forward core, and then also picking up Nino Niederreiter, which also helps them out quite a bunch. I think they deserve what did I give them with an A minus. Yes, there were two moves, but those two moves were kind of big in my opinion. They slot in Nemestikov. Yeah, Nemestikov is bottom six. He's playing third line left wing, and Nino Ryder slotted in all the way to the first line right wing. I feel like those trades definitely helped their offense become way better. Yes, I know Jared, you're pretty high on the Jets this year with what your prediction is. Looking pretty good right now. But yeah, I think this Jets score can definitely contend, and I don't know if winning the Central is like a confirmed thing for them, but I feel like it's
It's
between
probably
them
not.
between
Their second
them,
wild card.
yeah, between them, the Wild and the Avalanche is probably most likely what's gonna happen with the Central. Just looking at the standings right now. Give me 2 seconds.
I think they're the wild card too.
They're wild card too, so
Yeah, they
actually
are wild card, but still, like the Central is a very is pretty it's pretty good. Definitely, in my opinion, better than the Pacific. got Dallas, Minnesota, Colorado, Winnipeg, and like we already went over those teams, so won't say anything about them. But yeah, Dallas, Winnipeg definitely had a really good deadline. Maybe A minus, maybe pushing a little bit, but I feel like they deserve an A minus for just getting two guys that definitely helped them out a lot. Nemesnikov, Tampa had to move on from, and they just got him from the Sharks for pretty cheap. Yeah, Nate Ryder was also pretty good.
Yeah, for me, if you look just at the trades they actually made, just with the Nino Niederreiter trade and with the Vladislav Nemestikov trade, I like both these trades a lot. They help Winnipeg's mission of actually getting more depth scoring because as of now, their season has shown that their main problem is their lack of depth scoring. They have a lot of defensive depth. They have a lot of they have Connor Hellebuck in the net, so their goaltending solidified, their defense is solidified. Their main issue is their their offensive depth, and that's what they're getting with these two trades. So they're fantastic. But the reason that I'm only giving their trade deadline is a B plus and not anything higher into the A's, even though both of these trades individually I'd say are like A grade trades. They're really good for them. It's just the fact that they didn't do more. I mean, they're a team that knows they're going to need, if they want to make a playoff run, which was my prediction at the start of the preseason, I predicted them going to the Stanley Cup Finals, mostly riding their hot goaltender, Connor Hellebuck. If they really want to outcompete teams like Colorado and Minnesota and Dallas, and even the teams that they're going to have to go up against in the West, like Edmonton and Vegas, they are going to need a lot more depth in their offensive core. And I do think there was so much room for them to be one of the only Western Conference teams that was really bolstering up at this deadline. I think they had a lot of room to do more, honestly. And I was a little bit disappointed that even though these two moves are fantastic, they should have done more, in my opinion. They had a lot of room. No other team in the West was really bolstering up. This was Winnipeg's chance to really use their goaltending, know that they have that advantage over pretty much every other team in the West, and say, we're going to help this guy out, get more offensive depth at this deadline, and potentially go on a run. And after this year's trade deadline, the fact that they only got two moves, yes, Nito Niederreiter's playing on the first line, that's great. But the fact that Nemestikov, even though he's a good depth addition, the fact that they only got one depth guy, one top six guy, there was so much room for them to do more, in my opinion. I was a little disappointed they didn't do more, but just grading what they did, B plus is a fair ranking, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I went with an A minus. I did like the trades they made to get some good value for some nice depth, and I think this Winnipeg team definitely has an ability to do some damage in the playoffs. If they get set up with a good matchup, who knows? This team has gone far with the same core. They have gone very far in the playoffs. I legitimately think they could beat a Vegas, an injury plagued Vegas, and a Dallas, potentially Dallas too. If Hellebuck plays well, and their entire roster is strong, as well as their defense, as well if they're sorry if I meant if their offense is scoring, their defense is scoring, especially Morrissey like he is this year, I think they definitely have some potential to do some damage in postseason, as a wild card too, which is where they are now. And I did like the trades they made. Don't want to touch. I'm not going to touch up on them a lot, but yeah, no, I'm going to go for an A minus for the trades.
Yeah, it's pretty fair for the. I feel like we both we all had the same type of idea for what happened for the wild trade deadline. Yeah. So
Jack,
all right. So moving on next, we're going to the Pacific Division. First off, here the Edmonton Oilers. We already spoke a bit about them when we talked about the Nashville Predators and the Matisse Ekholm trade. But yeah, just looking back at that, I think it was a pretty smart trade. Got a lot of good stuff. Traded a decent bit. Traded Tyson Berry, which I feel like Matisse Ekholm is what Tyson Berry could have been for the Oilers. I don't know. That's just me. But yeah, Tyson Berry didn't really pan out for the Oilers as they wanted. Yeah, that was a pretty good trade. Also, the Jesse Puljujarvi trade. He wasn't going to do anything in Edmonton. I feel like Puljujarvi has had a better chance than Carolina already. They got a prospect out of him, so not like amazing trade. Maybe they could have gotten more, but I'm not sure they would have gotten much more than a prospect. And then the Bukeside trade just bolsters up their bottom six. But yeah, not much else from them. But yeah, I like their deadline. Definitely looking like a way better team compared to coming into the deadline. Yeah, coming into the deadline compared to coming out of the deadline. Yeah, that's why I gave them an A.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm probably Ken Holland's biggest hater out there. And pat yourself on the back, Mr. Holland, because he actually had a really good trade deadline here and bolstered up the exact same issues that I've been screaming that they need to fix for years now. For years, I've said the same thing. They don't have enough offensive depth. They don't have enough defense. They don't have good enough goaltending. Obviously, you weren't really going to make a trade to fix your goaltending at the deadline. So fine, they're going into the playoffs. Stuart Skinner and Jack Campbell. Stuart Skinner's at least kind of found his footing here, so chances are he's going to end up being the playoff starter. But in regards to their offensive core and their defensive depth, I mean, they bolstered up all of it at this year's deadline, and I really liked what the Oilers did here. Moving on back to that Matthias Ekholm trade, as I said earlier, when you look at who's going to win the trade for years to come, it is the Nashville Predators. I mean, the fact that they got a younger defenseman, they got a prospect, they got a first round pick, whatever, that's going to end up aging better for Nashville. But today, the Edmonton Oilers are basically in win now mode because anytime you have guys named Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on your team, you are in win now mode. You need to make sure these guys get a Stanley Cup. And getting Matthias Ekholm makes them a lot more defensive minded, makes them a lot more of a defensively strong team. And that was their exact weakness and the exact reason that they haven't really been able to go that far in the playoffs. And obviously, I know they went to the conference finals last year, but they ended up being absolutely demolished last year in the third round in the conference finals because they couldn't defend against the superstars on the Colorado Avalanche. Well, getting this guy Matthias Ekholm, he's a defensive, big body guy who, more importantly, is a veteran who has gone on deep runs before. And this is a guy that's absolutely going to help the Oilers' mission of being harder to play against. You look at Nick Bjugstad and Cam Dineen for that matter. These are all just depth guys. Nick Bjugstad, a third line, he's a centerman, but a third line, like depth forward, is just going to make them that much more deeper in terms of their offensive core. Cam Dineen, I believe he's a defenseman, but regardless, he's just another defense option. It's this deadline gave them a lot more options to work with. I'm giving them an A. The only reason it's not an A plus is the Jesse Puljujarvi trade. I don't really get what they're doing getting Patrick Pistola. He's just like a prospect that's a former third round pick, isn't anything special. And they lost a guy that, in little flashes at least, Jesse Puljujarvi has shown he's capable of living up to his expectations. He obviously hasn't been living up to them yet. Um, but I think if you were going to trade him, you still could have wagered the fact that he was a former fourth round pick and maybe could have gotten a little bit more from him. But regardless, in his defense and in the Oilers' defense, he was drafted back in 2016 and has not lived up to his expectations before. So it kind of makes sense why they couldn't get a lot for him. So that trade wasn't great, but the other two were fantastic. And I'm giving them an A. They really fixed their main issues at this year's deadline.
I went with a B. I think I did really like their Nashville trade. To get a position we strongly need. However, I just don't feel like it was necessary to give up Tyson Berry. I was kind of shocked a little bit. I don't know about you guys when he was in that deal. I wasn't expecting them to get. I mean, they definitely got better defensively with that trade, but Tyson Berry is the biggest piece of their best defenseman arguably before this trade. So I don't know if Darnell Nurse has been good or
I think it just has to do with cap space, though. I think the reason they
yeah,
had to
true.
throw in Tyson Berry is because he at least makes $4.5 million, whereas Ekholm makes six. If Edmonton were to have not given up Tyson Berry, like not given up anyone who has a notable cap hit, and just acquired Matthias Ekholm, they would have for sure gone over cap.
Yeah, okay, so that makes sense there, yeah. But I don't know. Ekholm was only retained 4%, so maybe they could have retained 50% and the deal would make sense. I don't know, but still they did get better defensively with that trade, for sure. And then picking up a guy like Bukestad for a small value with a not so important prospects. I don't know if Michael Kesselring is the greatest player of all time or Alex Gretzky. I'm not sure, but a third round pick. Sorry, just dogs barking outside.
Yeah, I hear that too.
Yeah, and then a third round pick is a good deal. And however, I just don't. I think the Pugliarvi trade was unfortunate. I think everybody was expecting it to happen. I could have seen them getting a third or a second out of it. But he hasn't had a strong year, and he really hasn't really figured anything out. Okay, calm down. Um, he really hasn't figured it out in Edmonton. everybody knew he was gonna get traded. But Pustola, I've seen this guy before. Second round, you could have gone a third or second round pick for like Blue RV. But who knows? I did like the moves they made. Maybe I'm putting them a little bit lower B. Maybe you could I could argue for a B plus. And we'll see how Edmonton does. Right now, does anybody know their standing if they're the wild card one or the third seed?
They're, I believe, second in the Pacific.
The
I believe it's
second?
Vegas, then Edmonton.
Yeah. So yeah, that's like they had definitely have a shot. And after what we saw happen last year, picking up a guy like Matisse Ekholm, who has been great not only defensively but offensively again for their team as well, is huge for that roster. And the Oilers definitely are a scary team in the playoffs this year. With probably some guy named Connor McDavid. I don't know who he is, but yeah.
All right. So moving on to the next team, we have the Vegas Golden Knights. I feel like the trade that really stands out the most for them was getting Ivan Barbashev. Yeah, I'll talk about the other ones after really quickly. But yeah, I feel like Ivan Barbashev was a really good addition for them. We already talked about this on the Blues side and Blues perspective. But yeah, they got rid of a prospect which didn't really work out for them and wasn't going to work out for them for Ivan Barbashev, which is a pretty good middle six forward. I'm just gonna double check where Ivan Barbashev is slotted on the. So
He's first
Barbashev,
line left
yeah,
wing.
he's first line left wing. Look at that. I feel like he's more maybe of a middle six left wing type guy, but he can also play the first line left wing, and definitely that definitely helps out Vegas a bunch. And then also the Teddy Bluger trade. I like that for for Vegas's depth. I feel like that was a really smart trade. The Angels are looking to move on from someone to pick up Miguel Granlund. So they move on from Teddy Bluger, which they trade to Vegas for prospect and a third. And then I like the Jonathan Quick trade. It was a little bit of an interesting one how it ended up happening with Quick being devastated trading to Columbus, not even leaving LA, staying in LA, not going to Columbus. But and then just getting traded to Vegas, half retained for Michael Hodgkinson, Leafs legend, in the seventh. But yeah, not much else to say about them. I kind of like their deadline. Got rid of Shea Weber's contract in a fifth for Dyson Mayo. But yeah, they didn't really do much else. But yeah, I feel like I kind of like their deadline. That's why I give them a B.
Yeah, for me, I'm giving them an A minus. I mean, you look at going into this deadline, their biggest need was goaltending, no question about it. Right now, Robin Lehner, Logan Thompson, and Aiden Hill are all injured. So they needed a goalie. Jonathan Quick was on the market. He was obviously unhappy being flipped to Columbus. And they reacted quickly and worked out a deal where they only needed to give up a backup goaltender, or probably based on their depth chart and goaltending. Michael Hutchinson was probably like their fourth goaltender. They gave up Michael Hutchinson in a seventh round pick, nothing that's affecting the Vegas Golden Knights, to get a guy that, at least in his prime, was a top goalie in the league. Obviously, he's nowhere near that level now, but I mean, he's a lot better chance of reliving his glory days now that you're actually giving him an opportunity as a starting goaltender. So it's better than nothing getting a guy that still, at the very end of the day, Jonathan Quick has the potential to bounce back to his former ability, and they didn't give up a lot. So it's a very low risk, high reward kind of move. So I like that one a lot for them. Getting Teddy Bluger, boom, depth guy. That, like, it just helps them bolster up their depth. Getting Ivan Barbashev, yes, they gave up a lot in Zach Dean. He's a prospect that was a former first round pick, could end up being good, but the timeline didn't match up. It's very similar to a situation with the Leafs with Rasmus Sandin. He was never going to get the opportunity to actually make it onto this lineup. Might as well flip him and get a guy that's actually going to put your team over the edge in the playoffs, like I believe Ivan Barbashev could do with these Golden Knights. As you mentioned with Shea Weber, they got rid of a lot of cap space for a guy that was never going to play for them. Got a depth defenseman that just is another option there. So all their moves were just kind of giving them extra guys to use in the case of injury, in the case of whatever. And then Barbashev is just giving them another top six addition. So it's very hard to argue against, in my opinion, a good grade. And I'm giving them an A minus. Might even be convinced to move them up to an A because I really like what they did here.
All right.
Um,
I just want to point out something really quickly before Dylan talks about them. It's kind of funny to think Vegas' goalie injuries are crazy. That if they had every goalie healthy, they'd have six different goalies that they can play. because they got Quick, Hill, Brassois, Thompson, and Laner, and they also emergency loaned Juri Patera. Not probably pronounced that really wrong, but yeah. Well, if you just take away Patera, five different goalies who can play NHL minutes, Vegas is definitely gonna have a problem when if everyone's healthy at the same time, someone's gonna have to go down, and whoever's gonna go down is not gonna be happy. Definitely with with the goalies, all of them can definitely play NHL minutes. All right. Sorry for interrupting you, Dylan. Move on. With yours.
Before I move on, I just want to compliment Jared on a pun I don't think he intended on saying. He said quick, and then like two words after that, he said quickly. So
I didn't
sorry.
even catch that.
So anyways, for Vegas, shout out to Max for repping the Gold Knights. And
Oops.
yeah, Max, you might want to take that off right now before we kick you off your own podcast. All right. Anyways, yeah, you should take notes from Jared from what he's wearing. Anyways, for the Golden Knights, I did like the moves they made. I went with a B+ for them. Picking a goaltender for Quick, who might be their game one starter, Logan Thompson. Even we'll see what the situation is come playoff time. But Quick has been very solid so far. His most recent game wasn't so strong, but I see Jared with some big news.
No. I was just doing my B reel.
Uh, no. So, anyway, so yeah, Quick has been very sharp so far for the Golden Knights, and yeah, so I think that's a huge trade for them, and then picking up some depth pieces for them while their guys are their forwards are injured, and Blueger and Barbashev were some nice pickups, and then to offload Weber, who's a guy that's gonna sit on your your LTIR for the next how many years. So, good for. I think they had a really good deadline. And the only thing that I just don't think that gets them into the A category is that they did give up arguably their best prospect in Zach Dean. And this team doesn't have many prospects for the future. So I feel like Vegas already had a very sharp roster, and they could have just gone with picks instead of prospects instead, but they ended up doing both. Not by much. They only gave up a third in prospect, but still. Um, yeah, I feel like Vegas. I think that's just what gets them separated from the A- A category. Um, but yeah, no. So I think this is a really good deadline for the Knights.
Yeah, it's pretty good deadline. I was just looking back at when the Golden Knights were expansion draft and they go to all the picks for expansion draft considerations. All right. Moving on next, we have the Anaheim Ducks. So I'm just gonna move on. I'm just gonna look there before I see anything. Yeah. So we already went over the John Klingberg trade. Probably could have gotten a little bit more out of it than they did end up getting out of it, but they move on from someone who they signed because nobody else was signing him in free agency for 7 mil, which looking at the point was definitely an overpay. Probably should have paid like 5 mil, maybe something like that. But yeah, they move on from Klingberg, who they really just didn't need or want. Kind of, he was the point of signing him was trading him at the deadline. They traded Kulikov half retained for McGinn, which the Penguins do not care for at all. And definitely Ron Hextall not looking the best there, but one of the first signings he ever did was Brock McGinn. And yeah, they also got a third out of it, which is pretty good. I didn't really do much else. Just a few meh trades, like some random guy for Austin Strand, Dylan Sakura for Maxim Golod, and just like other regular trade stuff. But yeah, there's not much else to say. I give him a C+. I feel like maybe they could have done something else, like trading Maxime Comtois or something like that. But yeah, I feel like C+ is kind of. I feel like C+ is pretty fair for them.
Yeah, I mean, what I wrote down is a C+, but honestly, the more I think about it, the more I think I want to give them a lower grade, potentially even a C- or a C. I really don't like what the Ducks did at this deadline at all. I mean, their only big move was losing John Klingberg, but even then, they didn't even get a lot for him whatsoever. Nothing that was worthy of trading him. I think they should have totally gone all in. That we're absolutely blowing it up. Their team isn't doing anything for years as it's currently built. It's an awful team, quite frankly. And I mean, I got some flack in the preseason for saying that they're going to finish seventh in their division. And people were like, no, this team's ready. They're going to move on. They're going to be at least fifth or fourth, potentially in the playoff bubble situation. I'm like, no, they're just not a good team. They're not well built at all. And I think they should have gone all in at the very least, blowing it up this year to make sure they get Connor Bedard. But even moving forward, this team, as it's currently built, isn't doing anything. And they should have just absolutely embraced that and made a bunch of moves. I get it. There's certain untouchables on this team. You're not trading Trevor Zegras. You're not trading Mason McTavish. You're not trading Troy Terry. But other than that, that's probably where the list ends. And there's a lot of other guys they could have flipped out of here. And I think this is a major missed opportunity for them to make some of those big time moves. Guys like Kevin Shattenkirk, you easily could have gotten a team that's competing for a Stanley Cup to acquire that guy as another depth defenseman option. A guy like Cam Fowler is a defenseman that's going to put a team over the edge, and it reminds me a lot of last year when they traded Hampus Lindholm. A team like a Boston or a whatever that's going to be contending for a Stanley Cup, you don't think they would have wanted to add a Cam Fowler onto their team? There's a lot. You mentioned Maxime Comtois. But even Jakob Silverberg, Max Jones, Brock McGinn, Ryan Strome, there is a lot on this Anaheim Ducks team that don't have the craziest contracts, that aren't the youngest players in the world, that they should have tried to move in that this deadline. The fact that they didn't even really do a lot of anything aside from at the last minute trading away John Klingberg, it makes it seem like their GM didn't even pick up the phone until the absolute final minute of this deadline. I mean, they could have done a lot here, and they did none of it. They did not impress me at this deadline at all. And this deadline could have been the framework for them absolutely blowing it up and building a great team for the future. But they just did none of that. They kind of stayed stagnant. And I think when you're a team in this position, staying stagnant and being scared to make those big moves is probably the worst thing you could do.
Yeah, I completely agree. And not only did they not make the moves that they should have, the moves that they did make were like so like not good. Like they were bad. They made two trades. They got a third round pick and a fourth liner for a bottom pairing defenseman. And then they traded their best player. That you see breaking news say, okay, Ducks finally make a trade. They get a significantly worse when they're getting rid of Klingberg here, and then you find out 2 seconds later that it's for Nestorenko, Schuster, and a fourth round pick. Like, what is that? That's just a horrible trade deadline. I had them as a C minus, but honestly, I could even put them lower because I just think they played it out so horribly. And this team definitely has a shot at getting Bedard, and even this draft would definitely turn around the franchise if they get a guy that could complement Trevor Zegras. Wow, what a pairing that would be with Zegras and Bedard.
And
That
McTavish.
would be extremely entertaining. Um, but if that's something that you want to do, you can't just trade Klingberg for a fourth and couple nobodies. You have to trade like a guy like Jared said, Kevin Shattenkirk. They have Cam Fowler's another guy that they could have offloaded. Like it's just a horrible trade deadline. I'm gonna go to C minus. Um, but honestly, it just I don't know, very confusing
Yeah.
deadline for Anaheim.
Yeah, there's not much to say about the Ducks besides what we all said. Alright, moving on. Next, we have the Calgary Flames.
How dare you.
They did not do much. They did Dryden Hunt for Adam Zahorna, which the Leafs probably won that. And at least that's
Yeah, I'd
my
actually
opinion.
disagree with you, but I just think it's a whatever trade. I mean,
Yeah,
Dryden Hunt at least is an NHL player, but
yeah.
he's
I was
not a
just
great.
mentioning. I was just mentioning it. And then the only legitimate trade they did was trading for Nick Ritchie, overpaid. Trey Stetcher, probably like I don't think I wouldn't say he's overpaid. And then they also traded Brett
It's fine.
Ritchie and Connor Mackay. This is the definition of a mid
Mackey.
trade, in my opinion. Basically, just swapping players with, yeah. Just I feel like maybe Arizona did this to like not have as much cap space on their hands, but I don't know why they would do that in Arizona's perspective, and just don't know what the point of this was. Stetcher maybe to get a seventh defenseman type guy, and Richie for bottom six to extra forward. I don't know why they did this trade. That's just my opinion. I could be a little bit harsh, a little bit less harsh with what they did, but I just don't really see how that helped them in any way at all. Like they have Nick Ritchie slotting in fourth line left wing and Troy Stetcher third line right D. They just picked up two guys for their bottom for the bottom of their forward and D lines, and they also traded Mackey, which I think he's kind of young. I could be wrong, but I think he's young. I'm just gonna double check here. Um, yeah, he's 24. So no, he's 26. He's 26. So not like super young, but still so weird. And then Brett Ritchie is 29. So yeah, I just don't understand the point of this trade at all. This trade, if this trade didn't happen, the Flames wouldn't look different at all, in my opinion. But yeah, I don't really got much else to say because the Flames, in my opinion, I could have even put this at a D minus. They just had a really bad deadline, in my opinion.
For me, I'm gonna say I'm putting it in an area where it's better than the Ducks deadline. I ended up deciding at the end of the day I'm moving the Ducks deadline down to like a D plus C minus. This one I'm slapping right at a C. I mean, it's the definition of just meh. I don't think they did anything bad because they basically did nothing. The only moves they made were probably trade wins because I mean Rubens for future considerations, like yeah, they got a roster player, sure. Getting Nick Ritchie and Troy Stetcher, fine. You got two depth guys. Dryden Hunt for a prospect rather than Zahorna, fine. At least you're getting an NHL player out of that. But it's the epitome of meh. It's a 60% of on your test. Like it's a 6 out of 10 deadline. It's a C, whatever. It doesn't impress me at all. And they're a team that had every freaking reason to go all in. They made massive splashes in the offseason, getting Jonathan Huberdeau, getting Nazem Kadri, as well as many other players. And they need to make the playoffs this year. With all they made last year, if they want to prove that their general manager isn't an absolute joke, they need to, at the very least, make the playoffs. And these moves just do nothing for moving the needle at all. So very disappointed here. There's not a lot to go into depth on because the three moves they made are the only word that really comes to mind is just meh. Like they didn't do anything that impresses me at all.
And I'm gonna go with the B minus because can we just appreciate how disappointing the Flames were? I had like looking like a horrible prediction. I had the Flames as the cup champs at the beginning of the year,
A
but
lot of people did. Like I know a few
yeah,
people. You aren't the only one.
yeah, like they had Markstrom coming off a great year. Their defense only got better. Um, they lost Goudreau, but they had Hubert. They added a guy that was second in point scoring the prior year. And obviously Kachuk was a massive loss. And looking back at it, wow, I think still those picks are the
Florida,
reason
Florida won.
I think Florida wins that trade now. I think I think those picks and that prospect is the only reason it's close. Um, However, I just think like what a disappointing year for the Flames. And at this deadline, you at least got to push because you're not gonna get Connor Bedard this year. Um, you're too good to get Bedard, so you might as well make a move or two to get into a playoff spot. They have a first round. They have all like three. They have a first round pick in the next first and second round pick in the next three drafts. So they definitely have the draft capital to make a little trade, and they did not do so whatsoever. And yeah, this team really is. It's quite strange. So I went with a B minus. I honestly could consider them going lower. The Richie trade was kind of funny when I heard about it. And then getting a guy like Dryden Hunt, who played a little bit for the Leafs, didn't really do anything on Toronto, but adding some depth for the team. I just they just it's just a very weird situation for Calgary. I mean, last night I was watching the Flames game or whatever in overtime and they lost and Markstrom was so frustrated and I think that like him slamming the stick is the pure emotion of Flames fans this year. Like it's unreal how like bad they've been. I mean, they have a winning record and everything, but yeah, it's been extremely disappointing. You want Canadian teams that don't have beef with Toronto to be successful, and the Flames just did not do that, especially after such a successful year last year too. So strange, very weird.
Yeah,
Minus.
yeah, it was pretty weird for what the Flames did. Moving on, we have the Seattle Kraken. They did nothing. They didn't even do a trade. At least the Flames did a trade. They didn't even do a trade. The only trade they did was trading for Jacob Magda a month before the deadline. I know Ron Francis was looking at this deadline being, we don't need any help. We're not the amazing team, but we're still gonna make the playoffs. So we don't need any help. But Burkowski's out. I know Donskoy's career might be over at this point with the amount of concussions he's had. Drager's out, but they don't really need Drager because Martin Jones is pretty good goalie, and Philip Grubauer, obviously not the best, but I feel like he's definitely doing better than what he did last year. But yeah, like looking at their roster, it's above mid. I'll say that it's above mid, but it's definitely close to mid. Vince Dunn definitely starting to break out starting this year. Jared McCann also doing pretty good this year, even better than last year. Matty Beniers doing pretty good this year. They have a good roster, don't get me wrong, but I feel like they could have done something to help in any way. Like there's still so many players that didn't get traded, even though there was a lot of players that did get traded. There was so many trades compared to other trade deadlines in past years, but I still feel like they could have done something, excuse me, to help out in any way. Like even forward, like mid six forward, they could have helped out. Even anywhere of defense, they could have gotten some sort of help. Like even trading for John Klingberg, obviously he did go to the Wild, end up going to the Wild last minute. But I feel like John Klingberg still could have been help for the Kraken. I just feel like they could have done something, like not like a single trade help in any way, even help their bottom six forward or their bottom six, well, their bottom four defense. And that's why I give them a D. Like I feel like it's kind of equal to what the Flames did, even though the Flames did do a trade.
I'm giving them a D as well. I mean, this deadline was just awful for them. And for as good as the Kraken have been based on their expectations, their GM should have rewarded them for that. I mean, they're a team that no one really penciled in to making a playoff spot this year. And they're currently sitting at fourth place overall in the Central Division. And they're a first wildcard team. I mean, as it currently sits right now, unless something crazy happens, chances are they're going to end up making the playoffs. And as of now, as much as they have a decent team, they should have at least had a move made to reward them for as good as a season that they've had. And they did a whole lot of nothing at this year's deadline. I mean, getting Jacob Megna is fine, but it's a third pairing defenseman. Like that isn't something that's going to put the Kraken over the edge whatsoever. And it's just disappointing considering how kind of young and exciting this team was in their first year actually being relevant at the very least. And I would have liked them to at least do one big move at the deadline, at least something like you mentioned to bolster up their depth, whether it's on defense or on offense, bolster up their depth in some way, shape, or form. And they did nothing. So very disappointing deadline. And, I'm giving them a D for that reason.
And I'm gonna go with a C minus. I feel like yeah, like when you guys talked about it, I mean, the Kraken really did not do well. They didn't do anything. They traded a fourth for Megna, which was in the beginning of February. It was very disappointing. They do have holes in their roster. That they do need to solve, even though they are a good team. And they didn't do that whatsoever. So that's unfortunate. For them because this is the team that I'm definitely rooting for in the playoffs. Uh,
Yeah,
and yeah.
no, and absolutely. And the thing with the Seattle Kraken is right now they have the highest shooting percentage in the entire NHL. Like they're getting extremely lucky in terms of their shooting, but for that reason, a lot of people aren't really taking the Kraken seriously because the expectation is okay. Once things go back to zero, once the playoffs start, they're not going to get the same puck luck that they've been getting kind of all year long. And it's very easy to imagine a team getting rid of the Kraken in like 5 or 6 games or something along those lines. because they are getting very lucky with the shooting, but they didn't get any piece that will actually make them be taken seriously. And all it took was 1 year. Get the equivalent of like what the Jets did. Get an Amestikov or something along those lines that shouldn't have been too hard to get whatsoever. To at least add another guy in there, another person to make this Kraken roster deeper, just to make people take them seriously, to reward these young kids like Matty Meniere's, like whatever, to take this team seriously and reward them for their efforts this year. And it actually is very frustrating that their GM didn't reward them with any of that. If you even look back to what the Leafs did in 2016-17, the year where Matthews, Marner, Nylander, and all them were rookies, after their great year, what it wasn't Kyle Dubas at the time, it was Lou Lamoriello, but what Lamoriello did is he at the very least brought a veteran in for them. He brought a guy like Brian Boyle in who's just gonna help out these young guys in their first ever appearance in the playoffs. And I think it was very disappointing that nothing along those lines happened.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So give us a second. Moving on to the next team, we have the San Jose Sharks. I give them B minus. Yes, moving on from a young player like Timo Meyer is a hard thing to do, but he wasn't gonna do anything in San Jose. I feel like what bumped me down from giving them like a B plus or even an A minus was not trading Eric Carlson because I think they could like yes, it's harder to trade someone with a no trade clause. I believe he has with like yes having a list of teams. I know Toronto talked to San Jose at one point, but yeah, they didn't trade Eric Carlson, which is kind of disappointing because this is his last hurrah, his last chance, and he's gonna be doing it tanking for Connor Bedard instead of doing it on a playoff team trying to get the cup. He did have his one chance with Ottawa when they made the conference finals, but besides that, like they really just I feel like they really could have traded Carlson. And yeah, moving on to the Meyer trade really quickly. It was a pretty good trade. They got Johnson, who wasn't going to do anything, who is stuck in the AHL in New Jersey. Fabian Zetterlund, who's a rookie, and then some other prospects, and they got a first, second, and seventh. I feel like that was a pretty good trade for Timo Meyer. I don't think they would have gotten much more if they were going to get more, but I feel like that was a pretty equal trade for both sides. Some other trades here. Nemesnikov just trading some random, it's not like a roster guy for Nemesnikov kind of type thing. Traded Benino for seventh and fifth, and then yeah, they didn't really do anything else because they traded away Nemesnikov for a fourth. But yeah, I feel like the B minus they could have done some. I feel like if they traded Eric Carlson, it would give them a B or B plus. But yeah, I feel like the B minus is pretty good for what they did end up doing.
Yeah, I'm gonna give them about a B or a B plus because I honestly I did really like this deadline for the Sharks considering the situation. As you mentioned in the case of the Timo Meyer trade, he was not returning to their team. It was either you trade him now with whatever offers on the table, or you end up keeping this guy and losing him for nothing. And with how good Timo Meyer is, there's just no excuse for losing him for nothing. So even though they couldn't get one of the top prospects on New Jersey, which a lot of people kind of had built up in their head that San Jose was going to get, and then as a result were very disappointed with the return. I get it. It wasn't an Alexander Holtz. It wasn't a Simone Nemec. It wasn't a Luke Hughes, whatever. That wasn't realistic. Alex Holtz was a little bit more realistic than the other two. But even then, obviously, New Jersey wasn't willing to part ways with them. So as a result, they got a trade worked out where basically they're getting a guaranteed first round pick. They're getting a second round pick that's conditional that could end up turning into 2 first round picks in this deal. Not to mention Andreas Janssen, who's just a decent roster guy that's pretty young and speedy, but never really got his opportunity to thrive. In New Jersey, we obviously know him a lot from his time in Toronto. He's actually decently skilled, and I don't hate throwing him on a team like San Jose, where similarly to like the case of who was it where we had him a while ago? I'm looking at San Jose's lineup.
Happening?
No,
No.
Barabanov, who we
Oh
had back in the
Yeah.
day that never got his chance in Toronto, and now all of a sudden is getting his chance in
my
San
God.
Jose, and is now a first line forward. And what do you know? On San Jose right now, Andreas Janssen's a first line forward. He's playing on their top line. So it's one of those situations where he never really got his opportunity to succeed in both Toronto and New Jersey, more importantly. So might as well get a guy like that, put him on San Jose, and thrive. And then in the case of Fabian Zetterling, just another prospect, Nikita Okia talk. He's a guy that was a former second round pick. Shahir Mukhamadullin, he's a former first round pick. So there's a lot of potential here to work with in this trade. And obviously, parting ways with Timo Meyer sucks, but he was going to leave no matter what. So they got a pretty good return in losing Timo Meyer that I really like for the San Jose Sharks. And then not to mention the fact that they traded a decent depth guy, Mikey I'm not sure how to pronounce
I
that.
see Monts, yeah,
Isamont, who
something
they
like that.
traded over to Tampa Bay. They got Nemestikov, they got him retained, so they could then flip him over to a contender. They ended up trading him to Winnipeg, so they liked that a lot. And then beyond that, they didn't really do much else, but I really liked those two moves for them. In the case of Nemestikov, just the fact that they knew a contender was going to be looking at a guy like Nemestikov. They're like, we might as well acquire him, and then we at least get something out of the return. They ended up flipping him over for like a fourth round pick. Nothing major, but it's better than nothing. And for a rebuilding team, they want all the picks they could get. So in general, I think a B plus is a fair place to put them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for me, I personally went with a B for San Jose. I didn't love the trade with New Jersey. I think they definitely could have done more, but they still got a first, second, some good prospects, and a roster player. Um, but I think building off of that, they made some good moves to pick up some draft capital. You got rid of Bonino and picked up some picks off of that. And flipped Icy Mod for a fourth round pick through Nemesnikov, and then that little trade at the end there with Dallas. So yeah, no, overall, they went with they did a good job going in the direction of Connor Bedard. We could have seen an Eric Carlson trade even. I think this might have been, I think Max was talking about it, Matt. This could have been the 1 year where you say, you know what, this guy's having a Norris winning year. You might as well just pull the trigger on a trade because next year, what happens if he's he's still going to be paid $11.5 million. We know that, but we don't know is if he's going to continue this um I don't know what the word is,
This level of play, like he's
this
not
level
going to
of
be as good as this ever again.
yeah,
Chances are, at
exactly.
least.
So yeah, so they missed out on a good opportunity there, and I feel like if they made a Eric Carlson trade and they got some good value for him, this could easily go into the A category. But the Sharks definitely did a good job of getting prospects, getting picks, building, starting to in the middle of that rebuild, and yeah, no, I think this team, another team that is potentially could potentially get caught off guard. That'd be a good. I could see that for sure being a good fit there. Being playing in the Pacific team, I feel like that's a place where Bedard might want to play, unlike Arizona. But yeah, so the I don't know. I think they made some good moves. And a B for me for the Sharks.
Yeah.
The only thing I wanna kind of rebuttal Dylan a little bit. You say that you think like the Sharks could have gotten more for Timo Meyer. What more could they have gotten? I mean, no reputable source really said like it was realistic that one of the big three prospects was going to end up being flipped there. So like that was kind of just speculated by like fans, but it wasn't realistic. Holtz a little bit, but it wasn't realistic to say one of the big prospects on New Jersey was going to be traded. But the fact that they got potentially 2 first round picks as well as a roster player now playing on the first line and 3 good prospects drafted in the first and second rounds, like how much more could they have gotten? Honestly, I see a lot of people like they're down the Sharks' throat a little bit, saying, "Oh, this is an awful trade for them." I don't really see it honestly. I think they got fair return for a guy that was not as good as Timo Meyer is. He was not coming back. So, and you have to look at the fact that also it took 2 weeks to work out a trade. I mean, there's a reason that they wanted to trade him a lot earlier than he ended up being flipped, just because there wasn't a lot of offers out there for this that were matching up what San Jose was expecting. They could not afford to lose him for nothing. And with this offer on the table, that's a good offer. Like take people's expectations out of the equation because I get people expected more, but they got good return for this. And the alternative was losing him for nothing and him leaving in the offseason because they can't work out a trade. So I kind of disagree with you there. I don't know if they could have gotten.
Well, I thought that to counter your point, what you're saying about Holtz, I think that's what I thought was gonna happen. I thought they could have gone one of those top three prospects, with Holtz, Hughes, and what was his
In
name?
Nemec.
Nemec. Yeah, that's right. But
The
I
only thing, like
yeah.
no one really I know it was mentioned on like TV, on Hockey Night in Canada, just because there was a lot of rumors out there, but I don't think any actual like sources that had talked to the GMs or whatever. Like, I don't think New Jersey was ever saying that they were willing to trade Alex Holtz in this deal. So if that's the case, and I get obviously San Jose, you would have liked them to drive a bit of a harder bargain to get a prospect like that. But if they're really not budging, you're going to risk potentially losing the one team that was really in on Timo Meyer, and then you're going to lose him for nothing in the offseason. So I don't think it's fair to say it was such an awful deal personally for the Sharks. That's just my opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think I do think they lost the trade, because also like the Sharks did. I mean, the Devils did pick up like 5 players in that trade,
Yeah.
still. So like, I think the Devils won that deal, but I don't know. Personally, they did pick up a lot of. I think they did pick up some good value for him. I mean, they have a lot of prospect. They pick up a lot of prospects, and then like you said, potentially 2 first-round picks. So really sets up their franchise. Obviously, a guy like Colts, if he's given the right opportunity in San Jose, could obviously go off. Uh, but yeah, no, we'll see what they do with the capital, the value they got for why am I blanking
For
on
Timo Meyer.
for Timo Meyer's name? Why am I blanking? But yeah, no. So yeah, I'm gonna go with a
I,
B for that.
All right.
I could agree. We're agreeing on the grade. I think it's just I don't know. I see a lot of people criticizing that trade, and I don't think it was that awful. I think the alternative was you lose him for nothing, so you might
True.
as well get something for him. That's what New Jersey had on the table. In my opinion, you take it and run because it's a good return. As soon as you get the opportunity to get 2 first-round picks, I think you take that any day of the week. And it honestly reminded me a little bit of the reaction after the Erik Karlsson trade when they ended up getting the first-round pick that ended up turning into Timmy Stutzla. So I think this is a type of deal that could actually, on the other way now, where this could age really well for the team that got rid of the star player.
Essentially.
All right. Moving on, we have the LA Kings. I give them a B. I feel like what they did, yes, it was disappointing and kind of disrespectful to Jonathan Quick to trade him just to get a good goalie and good defense. Which yes, no, not just to get them, but like obviously it was really smart for them to do that. But I feel like that was just kind of like, why did you trade Quick? You have other bad contracts. You can get them to retain half of Gavrikov's and trade someone else, but they did end up trading Jonathan Quick and a conditional first, not third. And the first is becomes 2 seconds if the Kings don't make the playoffs. So it's gonna be a first this year for Corpusalo, which which arguably has had a better season than Elvis Merzlikins. Merzlikins has taken a bit of a step down this year. Corpusalo has taken a step up this year, and then also getting Gavrikov, which was almost guaranteed to be a Boston Bruin until out of nowhere they got Orlov and Hathaway instead. So they pick up 2 really solid guys in Corpusalo, which yes they need help in, and that's with Cal Peterson being definitely overpaid. I feel like they could have been putting Cal Peterson instead. I don't know. But yeah, Cal Peterson and Phoenix Copley. Phoenix Copley hasn't really had much of a name around the NHL until this year, he has been not even that bad this year. Cal Peterson's kind of been mad this year. But yeah, they got a decent tandem in Corpusalo and probably Phoenix Copley as well, unless it's Cal Peterson instead. I'll just check that really quickly. Um,
Currently, it's Corpusalo and Copley.
Yeah, so it's most likely what's going to happen for the playoffs is going to be Corpusalo starting and then Copley backing up, and then also adding another defense and Gavrikov to slot in the second line lefty,
Gavrikov.
whatever. To let him slot in the second line again with Matt Waugh. I feel like that was a pretty good trade for them. They didn't do much else besides just getting a prospect for a third, trading Brendan Lemieux in a fifth for McEwen, trading Alar for Schnarr, and then trading Wagner for future considerations. Yeah, so I feel like a B pretty much sums up their deadline. Didn't do a lot, but what they did end up doing did help a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing. I'm also going with a B plus. I mean, as you said, the other trades are not really worth diving into so much. The big one is that Columbus trade where they got Jonas Korpisalo and Vladislav Gavrikov. And those are two fantastic additions that absolutely, I believe, could be the pieces that the LA Kings needed to kind of push themselves over the edge in this year's playoffs. They're getting a second pairing, a good big body defenseman, maybe not as good as the media was kind of hyping him up as around the time of the trade rumors, but nonetheless, this is a good defenseman, and they're getting a goaltender, especially when they've had a lot of injuries in the net, not to mention the fact that now they're parting ways with Jonathan Quick. They're getting back a younger, better goaltender that has a lot more potential. So I like this trade a lot for them. And the fact that they didn't have to trade a lot for it. I mean, it was a conditional first round pick, as well as a third round pick and a goalie that I get it sucks losing Jonathan Quick. He dedicated so much to the city of LA, won 2 Stanley Cups there and was a big part of those cups as the starting goaltender, winning the Conn Smythe in one of them as well. But I still think you're an NHL team. It's been a decade. You can't be loyal to a guy forever. Like at the end of the day, it's a business. And sometimes you have to make trades like this, even if it makes people unhappy. Unfortunately, around the time that Jonathan Quick negotiated his deal, no move clauses weren't really a thing. So he had no kind of protection there aside from just, oh, this team's going to be loyal to me. Well, a team like the LA Kings, they were able to be loyal to him in the time that they were rebuilding, in the time that they were a really bad team. But now that they're actually trying to make moves to put themselves over the edge in the playoffs, they just couldn't afford to have a goalie that was good a decade ago making $5.8 million, unfortunately. And it sucks. You feel gutted for a guy like Jonathan Quick. I'm happy at least he's getting a better opportunity over in Vegas now. But at the end of the day, when the return available was, you need to trade Jonathan Quick, this goaltender, you need to part ways with him because we're willing to give you a good defenseman and a good goaltender. I don't blame the LA Kings for taking that deal any day of the week.
And I agree. I think they do win that trade. They get a goaltender who they get better in net with Corpusalo. Still don't think he's a guy that's a goaltender that's going to win you the Stanley Cup. And the Kings are just a few pieces away. I think all around, offensively, defensively, and net from being Cup contenders. Even though they were so very close to being Edmonton last year, and this year they might have a chance against Seattle, which is a team that's very inexperienced. So I think I do really like the trade. I'm not like Jared. I'm only going to focus on their big deal. It was unfortunate the way it went down with Johnny Quick, but to pick up a huge defensive minded defender in Gavrikov, and then Korpisalo is having a career year, is huge for their team. And they're a team that who knows could even uh, could make some damage in the playoffs. Because if they get past the first round, um, Vegas is a team that isn't perfect, I would say. Um, they still, I think the Golden Knights still have some holes in their team. So, um, we could, who knows what the Western Conference is gonna look like. Because it's just so it's I feel like it's a little bit more spread out than the Eastern Conference. I feel like there's
Absolutely. It's so
yeah
much harder to predict.
yeah, exactly. So, I think who knows? The Kings could definitely do some damage in the postseason, and with a great trade, with a big trade like that, I'm gonna give them a B plus, because I think they just did a good job of making their roster better. If we're just talking about on paper, aside from the mental, the spirit, the life side of things, and we're just looking hockey. They made some huge moves. One big move for the franchise, and that's definitely going to help them in this postseason.
All right, moving on to my opinion, the most controversial NHL trade deadline with the Vancouver Canucks. I give them a C. I don't know if you guys. Well, it looks like you. I'm not gonna spoil. I won't say anything. I give them a C. Like, I don't know what to say. I'm kind of speechless with what they did.
There's one move.
Trading Bo Horvat. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. I'll go over that a little bit. Yeah, Bo Horvat obviously wasn't classified as a deadline trade, but it still was technically a trade deadline trade Traded Bo Horvat, got Beauvillier, which kind of I think worked out in favor for the Canucks. He's had more of a chance with the Canucks and he's been playing decent. Also got Atu Ratu. I don't know why the Isles traded
Ratu.
that. No, it's Atu
No,
Ratu.
it is Atu Ratu.
Oh, actually?
Yeah. They got Atu Ratu, a guy who did play a little bit of time in the NHL for the Isles. Didn't do outstanding, but he's still so young. And he was at one point he was projected to go first, in I believe the 2021 draft.
2021, yeah.
Yeah, he was projected to go first for quite a while, but he kind of he kind of went down a little bit in rankings, but he's still a pretty good prospect. And the Isles to move on from him after let me see how many games. Let me see how many games Atu Ratu was able to play. Because I don't think it was much. In the NHL, he played.
He had a little cup of tea, but
Yeah,
nonetheless, he was a top prospect that
he
could
played
go to
27.
overseas.
He played 27
Well, cup of
games.
tea.
He had 5 points in 27 games for the Isles, and so far for the Canucks, he has 1.3 games. 3 games. So yeah,
Yeah.
they like obvious. I just don't know. Like maybe Lou Lamoriello thought that he wasn't going to be good after having him with. Oh no, never mind. Wait, what? No, okay, I got confused a little bit. Never mind. Yeah, so I think Lou Lamoriello thinks of it as this guy didn't do good in 15 games for us, so screw him. Let's trade him for a better player. Let's trade him with some other pieces for a better player. That's probably what he thought. There's a chance that's what he thought, but Lula Morello, he just wants to get what's better for them. And then also getting Vitaly Gravtsov, I feel like that was a win for the Canucks. I don't know, like only getting Will Lockwood, which is just random prospect and a seventh round
Yeah.
pick. He definitely could have been in like a Patty Kane trade or something, but like I don't know, I'm kind of speechless on what the Canucks did this deadline, and then just I'm not gonna even go over that one. But Luke Shen trade, I feel like that was pretty equal for both sides. Luke Shen, the Leafs honestly didn't really need, but it's still good to have reunion with Luke Shen, and then gone for a third round pick. I'm pretty sure that's what his value's been like the whole time he's been rumored in trades. And then the most weird trade the Canucks made this deadline was trading for Philip Hronek.
Why?
Yeah,
Why?
why? Exactly why? Yes,
All the
look,
same
okay, maybe
reaction.
5 years down the line, you pick up someone like Philip Hronek. Yes, I say yes.
Well, he's
But
like, oh,
they're a
He's
bad
a
team.
good player, but
Looking,
he just doesn't match what they
yeah,
need.
they're a bad team. Yes, Vancouver's defense did get better with Philip Hronek, but they
You,
don't need him at all. Looking maybe 3 to 5 years down the line, they might need someone like that. But they should be tanking for Bedard, not trading away the Isles first round pick that's conditional and a second round pick for Philip Hronek in a fourth. Not like why? Just why? That was probably one of the dumbest trades of the deadline, in my opinion.
absolutely. And if I
And
were to
then
make my, oh no, sorry,
yeah,
go on.
yeah, I'll just say one more thing, and you just go on. And
Yeah,
lastly,
go
the
on.
Curtis Lazar trade. Nothing big. Traded him for a fourth. It's probably the most they were gonna get of him. But yeah, it was a pretty decent trade. Yeah, go on, Jared.
Yeah, well, if I'm just going to grade based on that Philip Hronek trade alone, I would easily give this trade like a D. Not even the fact that it was a bad trade in terms of what was flipped. It's the fact that it didn't match what Vancouver needed whatsoever. I mean, they want to be bad. Philip Hronek makes them a better team, which is the opposite of what they need when they're trying to get Connor Bedard on their team. And it just was baffling that they were willing to trade a first and a second round pick, conditional or not conditional. The whole point of why I actually really liked that Bo Horvat trade for the Canucks, which I'll get to in a little bit, is because they got younger as well as they got a first round pick out of it. They're starting to focus on their future. And I finally thought that trade was a hint that they are starting to focus on the more rebuilding direction, even though their GM refused to say it. Well, apparently not, because they're like, nope, we're just doing our retool again. And they literally traded a first and a second round pick for a guy that makes them a better team, which is not what they need. baffling trade, terrible trade, but their whole deadline in general, I'm still going to give a C or a C plus because I do think all the other moves they made actually made sense. But that one move was baffling. Just going through that, I know Max, you went through them, but I really like that Canucks trade with the Bo Horvat trade. I mean, they were basically banked on the fact that their captain, Bo Horvat, was having the best year of his career. They banked on his value. They banked on the fact that he was not going to reach that level of play again. And they got a top six roster player out of it, a top prospect that wasn't living up to his expectations in New York, or not even not living up to his expectations. He was just a young guy that was probably the Islanders' best prospect. They got him, and they got a first round pick. On its own, I loved that trade. It ruins it now a little bit that they decided to take that first round pick and flip it for Philip Hronek. But regardless, that was a good trade. Moving on to the Vitaly Kravtsov trade, they're getting another prospect that didn't work out in New York and are trading nothing for it. Another low risk, high reward move. The Josh Bloom Riley Stillman one is whatever. It's whatever. Trading Curtis Lazar for a fourth round pick just gets them another draft pick. Trading a prospect for future considerations, it'll eventually probably just get them another late draft pick. So in general, I liked their deadline, but that one Philip Hronek trade absolutely just puts a damper on this because it takes what would have been otherwise a good deadline, probably in the B's. I'd probably give that one individual trade like a D. It averages out to I'm giving this deadline like a C-ish because that trade move was just awful.
Yeah, and going back to the night of January 30th, 2023, I freaked out because the Canucks made a good trade for once. And then and Beauvillier's been really good for them too. Rotti's a very good prospect. And that first round pick has potential to be in the lottery. And in a stacked draft class, the Islanders pick isn't going to end up being Bedard, but it's going to be a good player for their future. But nope, you're going to go ahead and trade that pick, as well as a second rounder this year, where you're going to miss the playoffs. So that's going to be a high second round pick. And if some guy falls out of the first round, that you could even consider that to be a first round pick, sort of value. But so yeah, so to lose that, for a guy who hasn't played a game in a Canucks uniform yet, and the Canucks are just in a week and a bit are going to be eliminated from playoff contention. It's just like it's funny, but it's also so depressing, like to see every year these guys. It just I don't know how you don't just erase everything. Get rid of Pedersen's a good Pedersen, Hughes. You keep everybody else gone. Miller doesn't want to be there. Besser, you should have traded at the deadline. Like, it's just a horrible spot. I liked I and you did I didn't really like the other trades they made. Lazar, Shen, the Stillman Bloom deal, and then picking up Vitaly Kravtsov for little to nothing was also really good value. So it was just really like rained on a really good deadline that the Canucks and Patrick Alvin, I think his name is,
Yeah,
yeah, that they were having. So it just it's constant shit in Vancouver and
they don't learn.
yeah,
They don't learn. They people have been saying they should be rebuilding for years now, and they refuse to admit that a rebuild's what they need. They're like, no, we're just going
yeah,
to retool. We have a good team right now. The evidence
no,
shows otherwise, but
yeah,
it's
Yeah.
frustrating, and I feel for Canucks fans.
yeah,
All right. Yeah. I was gonna say about JT Miller. Like, yeah, like they could have easily just traded him to the Penguins for like like the Penguins barely have any kind of draft capital, like prospect type stuff, but they could have easily traded even Besser Miller to the Penguins, one of them to the Penguins, one of them to somewhere else, just to like let them have a chance on a team that actually wants to win in a normal way instead of being bad and still trying to be good. So yeah, that was definitely an interesting way to end the video, but looks like we're done. A little bit longer than we planned to, but still a fun time. Hope you guys enjoyed. You guys want to say anything before we head out?
Yeah, no, it's always fun coming on the podcast. Obviously, we'll be on at some point before the playoffs to kind of do our playoff predictions, but in general, it's always a blast. Thank you so much for having me, and I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. Yeah, I'm super excited for the playoff predictions. I've been really like talking about, really like debating what I should do for the playoffs this year. I already hinted to my matchup earlier in the episode, so it's gonna be fun. But as always, it's been fun coming onto the pod. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like you guys said, we'll be back with a play of one probably in a month or something like that. So yeah, we'll be back soon. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.